Rinpoche. Well, these names go by so fast, I can't pick up the language, so I was wondered if anybody else knew anything about him.
What's his name again?
The name of the movie or the name of him?
I don't know, whatever would tell us. Who
Nicholas
this guy is.
Nicholas Vreeland, Vreeland. It was fascinating. So it was on, I think it was on Netflix.
I don't remember. We saw the movie, but I can't remember any of them.
No,
Names.
Monk with a Camera.
What's it?
And he funded this monastery by selling his photographs.
Neat.
Oh, yeah, I have heard.
Yeah.
Huh.
And he had good connections in New York City for
Well,
a
yeah.
reputation to raise $400,000 to build this monastery. So.
Did he take pictures of monks?
Pictures of monks and children and trees and beautiful photography.
KCC needs a
So there
camera.
wasn't a question there, just
It seems if anybody can do that for KCC in our new urban center, that would be very inspiring and meritorious. I'll do it in this life and the next.
we just need a famous name to sell it. I've
I
got
don't
one.
think we need a famous
Yeah.
name, we just need to recognize the talents that we have.
I'm a photographer, I mean, I could take photos.
Rich friends to life.
If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend
Neat.
the film.
Monk of the
And then there was another one we saw like 2 or 3 weeks before that on there called Samsara.
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, made by the same people who did Baraka.
Oh, gosh.
What's the question?
Linda, yeah.
Yeah, so yesterday when we were looking at the aspirations for Mahamudra prayer,
Right.
there are many references to personal pronoun, like as we ask in this way,
Oh,
grandchildren.
yeah.
And so, I mean, I understand that from a way of making sense, but I also sometimes wonder, like, how do you work with that when, the basic premise is, self?
What is there that's not workable?
It isn't that it's not workable, I guess I'm just wondering ways to hold it. When you're reading that prayer,
Say more.
I was hoping not to. So, not having the prayer memorized, Bill, maybe you can help me out, I know that you do.
You want the last one?
Well, I'm just thinking, there's multiple stanzas where,
Well, you mentioned the last one. so-
I mentioned the last one because that's the one I could remember. And
By the compassion of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the power of whatever pure virtue there may be, may my wishes and those of all beings be fulfilled as we ask in this way. I do have it memorized, but I also.
Yeah. I don't know if this is at the top it's a curiosity, but I also hope that there's something more in my question than just curiosity about.
Well, we did talk about that very issue yesterday.
Okay, I don't remember us talking specifically about when it's referencing I and mine.
Yeah.
We and.
I remember at the Dharma Center in San Francisco, once, there was a teacher who visited who made an impact on one of the students there. And along the way, he asked her, or gave her an instruction. I don't think she was particularly self-centered, so it couldn't have been, that sort of thing, but he gave her an instruction for, I think it was a year, not use personal pronoun. And that was very interesting. But I'm not I don't know why that instruction was given, but I know how much angst it caused her in trying to avoid using it.
Trying to function.
Like everywhere you went, you just looked weird. Are you not a native speaker of English or what? It's like all of these things were going on. And when the year was over, I of course, I have no way of really knowing, but my guess is it did not reduce the sense of self at all. Maybe even increased it slightly by virtue of self-conscious stuff around not being able to speak naturally. And it was just, I just never forgot. I always thought, what is that? Was that skillful or not? It's like, what is that exactly? And in the end, I thought, I have no idea what it was. Like, but if it was meant to reduce the sense of identification with the I, me, and self, and this, it didn't look like it had any impact one way or the other. Except, I think that it's actually better to just use the language in the way that it's designed to be used. And when you're speaking, you can remind yourself that there is no way to speak without being caught up in dualism. There is no way. It's built in. It's built into our stream of consciousness, and therefore it's built into the way that we inadvertently design the language and use the language and all of these things. And if you try to circumvent it by performing surgery on the language somehow, it just becomes even more obvious somehow. On the other hand, to not do those things, then you also, it's not as obvious. It would be nice to be reminded that we're caught up in this thing. But you can't, and I think Siddha Rinpoche makes a good point about the third karmapa, that you can't actually talk about these things without getting caught up in the very thing that you're trying to overcome. So does that mean that you should give up and not try to overcome those things? No. But it probably means you should give up thinking that by intellectualizing and conceptualizing the whole thing, no matter how clever or smart we are, it never gets us to where we need to go. And thus we have a whole set of language rules for talking about the ultimate, which are very unsatisfying and confusing to someone who doesn't know what they are. Like, for example, the mind is unborn and undying raises a whole bunch of questions. What the hell does that mean? And the usual misunderstanding is that it means it's permanent.
We've been around a long,
Oh, it's been around a very long time. Yeah. And we'll be around longer than I'm around. This is kind of like that. And it's just, it misses the point to try and take that language about the ultimate and interpret it into the relative. It brings the ultimate down to the relative. It's better just to have it misunderstood, just like, or not understood. Understand that, like, I think I need to read these phrases over and over and over and over again and engage in relevant practices, which is almost all of our Buddhist practices. And gradually, I think we all have this sense, like you recite certain prayers over and over and over again, especially those that focus focus on the ultimate, which the Mahamudra Aspiration Prayer definitely does, but not 100%. And that's the language that's bugging you, is that piece that's not 100%, but that 100% really just reminds us, I actually have an identification with self, and yet I'm trying to relate to this ultimate approach. It's just honest in a certain way. I understand a little bit, so I really want to do this, but I'm not actually there yet. I wish I had some language that would help me get there, but there isn't any such language. The thing that helps you get there is the meditation practice. And reciting that text is a great exercise in frustration sometimes. But I can say that many people have found that prayer, that aspiration prayer, to be really have a remarkable influence. And I think it just comes by dint of force. You can repeat it over and over and over, and for some time you have this sense of it's not working. It's not working. But of course there's no it there. It's just a paper with toner on it. and noises that we're making with our mouth. Gradually they come together and something happens. On 3-year retreat, we recited that text every day at least once. Some people recited it 10 times a day. I found in the beginning for about 6 months, like I did not relate to the prayer at all. I actually felt like it was a hindrance. And along the way, one of the other retreatants that I particularly related to, in a passing comment, said that he found it the most helpful liturgy in the entire retreat. And I was so shocked by that, because we kind of shared the same understanding in so many places. I thought, like, how could we be so far apart on this? But then, because I appreciated him, I thought, I have to go and find out what this is. And it took about another 6 months of daily recitation and just kind of working with it. And at some point it just clicked, and it was really, I would say, and it came to the place of the single most helpful liturgy in all of my years of practice.
Is that the prayer that exhorts us to look again and again at the mind which cannot be looked at?
Yeah, the same one.
It's
Yeah.
so powerful. It's like Emily Dickinson's zero at the bone. What does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean anything. That's the source of the power of it. It puts you into that place.
Yeah. Yeah, you feel, there's certain things when you read them, you feel like you've learned something, but you can't find it. And that's what makes it powerful. It doesn't feel like nonsense. It feels like you've just heard the truth, but you can't nail it down. You can't conceptualize it. That's what's frustrating, because we're so used to doing that. Anyway, that's my 2 bits.
Thank you.
One of the things that I noticed looking at Tibetan text is that a lot of times there are more pronouns added just to kind of make it make sense in English than there are. But there are, in this particular case, it's Dagdang Simchen, so I am sentient being. So it really is, it does have that. And there is, I think, a tendency that we can sometimes have to go at it like lawyers, sort of insisting that this is the ultimate frame of reference is like this, and therefore, you know, everything along the way has to be consistent with this part here. When we're starting out, we would have the experience if we tried to avoid personal pronouns just because that's the real way that things are. We would personally experience, I would experience frustration, and sort of proving like, oh no, actually that's the place where I am, and that's my frame of reference for moving forward. So trying to express it in this way that kind of neatly ties up the bow very. I finally got a contract that's ironclad. it's not an uncommon thing to look at something and say, but isn't this like this, really?
Well, I think the
Start
thing
where
that
you are.
I appreciated in this is just that recognition that we are locked into this sense of self and other the moment we open our mouth. I mean, the whole model, particularly of our Western culture, is this separation, and it's
I don't think it's Western culture. I think that's a mistake.
really.
It's like, it's everywhere.
It's
This is not a cultural thing.
Well, I think of Cartesian, that whole model that.
Of course,
Of
but when we're
duality.
talking about attachment to the illusion of self, that knows no cultural boundaries.
Yeah. Okay.
Goes beyond species.
Yeah, goes beyond species, yeah. I think it's great to ponder that and recognize that, because otherwise we can get caught in a disabling belief that we cannot be Tibetans and therefore we cannot engage in the Dharma.
Our deck does not include the Joker.
Yeah.
I like it.
We get to laugh, but we get no insight.
Or the other illusion that if we can just become Tibetan, we will somehow be whole.
That's the same thing, just the other side of the
Right.
card.
Let's really just be cool.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you.
So, I am sitting here observing my mind as we're speaking about the Mahamudra aspiration prayer, which I love. And I find myself continually getting caught in this process of I need to do the Nundro, but it's 2 hours and I've got 5,000 prostrations, and I just really want to sit, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to sit, because sitting, sitting, that just feels better. And then I'll find something else, right? I'll do this, and so I'm watching my mind as you're talking about the aspiration prayer, and maybe even 10 times a day, and then after 6 months, and then I embody it, and then like, oh, that could be it. And so I'm just so aware of this mind, this grasping mind, and like finding this place in myself that I want somebody to say to me, do exactly this.
Say that again.
Do exactly this for this much time, this many times a day, and that's it. And I can go, okay, that's what I'm going to do. But I find myself, not on a daily basis certainly, but like sitting here right now, it's like, well, do I add that? Do I do that instead? Or, there's such a bounty, and I feel so blessed that there is we have so much, so many options and so much information and so many choices. But I find myself in this place of, I want simplicity and instruction, and to just spend the rest of my life doing the one thing.
So what's your next step?
Pardon me?
What's your next step?
I'm waiting for you to tell me what to do. Which I know isn't going to happen. It's really just more than noticing it, and I think following what feels right inside of me, I suppose, and having my teacher tell me, guide me, not tell me, but guide me.
there is a way in which I think you could say really accurately that one could take any of a broad range of practices and engage in them with consistency and all, and it would bear fruit. And that it's in the tradition, we always say, like, it's really important to get that from your teacher, like, not to make it up, because we have no confidence. We know ourselves well enough, you know, so therefore it's not likely to work if we decide what it is we're going to do. And what most of us got, because that's easy to understand, right? I need to get it from somebody who I have some sense has more realization than I have and cares about me and would not intentionally hurt me, and, you know, a whole list of things. And then that person says, do this, and you can feel confident that that's the right thing to do. And more often than not, we got those instructions in the form of what many of us know as the Nundro practices. And a significant percentage of people found that to be overwhelmingly difficult. And so they'd practice it, and then they'd stop, and then they'd go, and some people finished, and some people abandoned the entire path even. So there's a way in which I think to get an instruction and follow it is really helpful and really good to do. On the other hand, I'm not at this point convinced that it's necessarily good to receive an instruction that we are not able to complete. So we often don't know what that is. I mean, as the individual looking for instruction, we often don't know what we're able to do. So not only does the individual need to feel like they can do it and will do it, but then there inevitably has to be some kind of support when it doesn't work. And that's a labor-intensive process. And what I mean by that is the support from a community, support from teachers, and all of that focused on individuals. So the Tibetans, as we know, they had a spiritual mass production system. That is to say, if you have 5,000 young monks, you give them something that will keep them doing something useful in the Dharma for a period of time where the individual support is really not available. And then if you do enough of those, there'll be quite a few people who actually succeed at it. But maybe there's even more who don't succeed. But that numbers game doesn't work so well for us. And so it gets a little difficult. But I think that we each deserve to have an instruction, an opportunity to take something and do it. And there's a line in Siddha Rinpoche's commentary on the Mahamudra Aspiration Prayer, where I can't remember the exact language of it right now, but he basically says it's important to get just what you're talking about, an instruction that is clear enough and difficult enough, but not too difficult, so that it can be done and that it doesn't require a large amount of support. That's really important. And then you go to the next step. So what he's saying is everybody wants to practice Mahamudra. Everybody wants to practice Dzogchen. Everybody wants to practice like whatever they hear.
Non-meditation.
Non-meditation, yeah. The best of all. You know, it's kind of like you're already fully awakened. You just don't recognize it. Just wake up. And in the beginning, that sounds like fantastic. You know, I could give up everything that I was doing and just notice that I'm actually already there. And then a year later, you realize you haven't been able to notice it. And not only that, all the suffering and everything else is still going on. And then we fall into a pit from that. So it's a difficult proposition. I think there's a solution to it that we actually have also not mastered, but is actually really easy. And that is, you talk to whoever it is you're trying to get the advice from, and when you go to have a meeting with that person, you actually go with a specific request. A specific request, and you talk about that a little bit, and you get the request in, and you get the instruction. And the instruction then you need to follow without anything except just understanding. Like, you want to learn to weave a rug, this is what you have to do 1,000 times. Then you learn to weave a rug. So in the same way, this is what you need to do 1,000 times. Don't worry about anything, just do it. And at the end of this period of time, you'll know why you did it. That's so hard for us to do that. We want the truth first. And then we feel like we'll understand why it is that we would do it. But actually, it doesn't happen that way. The conceptual understanding does not carry the power behind us that the direct understanding does when we got it through the practice. Bokram Rinpoche was like really big on this thing when he was living. Like, you do the practice, the truth will reveal itself. We don't want the truth to reveal. We don't want to take the time. Put out the effort. But it appears to be there is no substitute. On the other hand, I think you're right. You want to really do a practice, it's really important, and the tradition also has this in it. You need to get the instruction. Because in the instruction includes the permission to engage in the practice. You need to get a text, if there's a text, and you need to get permission to read the text, which also there's a little ritual for. And the reason why those little rituals are there is so that we have a sense of confidence. That's one reason. Like, that is to say, I got permission from somebody who knows. They know me well enough to say, you can read this, or you know you shouldn't, you should do this first. And so I feel confident. The other reason is that by virtue of those authorizations, we all then preserve the teachings. They don't get lost, because we're actually always very closely connected with exactly what the practice is and the formula, and the liturgy doesn't get changed. And so things maintain their integrity. I think the key here, a takeaway for everybody really should be, you have somebody that you count as your teacher, and you go to them, and you're thinking you're going to get an instruction. You need to go with a request for the instruction. Request the instruction. And then, when the instruction comes, it's like, it doesn't work like this with most Tibetans, but I think with Westerners it can. The question of, how much do you think you can do, is a relevant question. Now, if you're a nun in a monastery or a monk in a monastery, that question doesn't come up. The abbot of the monastery asks you to do it, then you're just going to do it, and that's your life anyway. But here it's not like that. So I think Western teachers should ask, what do you think you can do? Like, just real terms, an hour a day? 10 hours a day? 10 minutes a day? Like, what is it? Because the practice that you would do that would bear any fruit is partly dependent upon how much time you're able to put into it. You can't do Nundro for 10 minutes a day and you will not finish it in this life. So that amount of time then would say, maybe Nundro is not the right practice at this time. Maybe better do something that 10 minutes a day actually does bear fruit. And if it's an hour a day, then that's a different set of parameters there. So then you do that, you do exactly what you were requested to do, what the instruction said, and you go back to that person periodically and you say, I have done this. You now have that person's attention, because they gave you the instruction, so you have a right to say, I deserve, I demand, you owe me this. You owe me more instruction, and I want those, and I wanna continue. And there is a tradition there where you did that and you're honestly coming back and reporting, you have a right to request, even in strong terms. I've done what you said to do, I deserve the next step. I think it's helpful, even helpful, I can say, somebody requests in strong terms and they've done something, then I feel obligated. I think generally teachers feel obligated. Like, why else are you doing this? So, there's a point at which we have fun and make jokes, and there's another place where it's not actually a game. Okay.
Thank you, that was a very clear instruction. I really appreciate that.
Well, what else?
I guess I can ask something if nobody else has anything. I think it's just a side question to what your question was, but I'm always looking for, I don't know what I'm sure they have a name, like meditations that you do, like walking meditation or eating meditation, like meditations that you do while you're awake and moving around in the world.
Yeah.
When I was really young, like 6 or 7 or 8, I don't know where I got this idea, but I would choose a day, it was usually on the weekend, and I would take away a sense.
A what?
I would spend a whole day blindfolded, for example, or I would spend a whole day, I once tied my ankle to my thigh and hopped around on one leg just to change my day,
That
essentially.
explains a lot.
And so, yeah, it does. Because, you know, at first I thought, oh, I want to see what it's like to live like a blind person. But then it became, this is just an entirely different way to experience a day. And so now as an adult, I do little things like, you know, for the entire month, every time I notice I'm hungry, I'm going to wait 1 hour before I can eat. And just to spend more time with that. And so I love, and when you were talking about the instruction the woman was given not to use the I pronoun, I thought, well, that's just another meditation, because every time she goes to speak, she has an awareness.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what it is. If every time you speak you have to close your right eye or something, it's just another way to force you to be present, aware.
Yeah. Kind of a mindfulness exercise.
Yeah, and so I'm always looking for little, I mean, I have to still go about my life and be a professional, and I can't walk around with my right eye closed, but, or my, you know, leg tied together. But I do look for little things like that. They're gonna, like, throw me into, you know how when you put on sunglasses for the first time and all the colors change in your scape? And you're like, oh, wow, the trees look so much more green. And then you get used to it really quickly. So I look for little things like that that will kind of throw me into a new awareness. And then I hang on to it as long as I can. And so I don't know if those are different meditations or if they're sort of short-lived. They don't last long. But they are an interesting way to be mindful.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if those are called something, or if there's a place to find other ideas, or I don't know. I don't know what the question is exactly, but it seems part of what you were just talking about. I look for those things.
Yeah.
Remember Bo Karimshe's little book, A Day in the Life of a
Oh
Bodhisattva?
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
A Day in the Life of a Bodhisattva.
Do we have any of
I don't
those?
think we can get it. John, we haven't been able to find that book. have we? No.
Really?
What's the title?
Day in the life of,
Buddhist
Never heard of it.
practitioner.
Of a Buddhist practitioner. That's
Uh-huh.
right.
Of a Buddhist practitioner.
Does
That's
it have
right.
things like that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it has all
Oh,
kinds of
very
equipment.
cool.
If you go upstairs,
somebody write that down?
contemplate this, as you're
Okay.
putting on your clothes, contemplate that.
Perfect.
They're just, but you can kind of get the principle, and I think you already understand the principle, which is if you have, you have these two things you want to bring together, it includes mindfulness and your
Yeah.
aspirations. So you use the things that you do all the time
Right.
as a basis for triggering that, for
Mhm. Okay, that sounds
Ooh,
good.
even
A
a
day
practice
and-
for going to the bathroom.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh,
There's nothing that you could do that there wouldn't be a practice for.
Right, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
and sometimes it's, you don't know what the practice is exactly, something like,
Mhm.
I'm walking through the park, how would a bodhisattva, what would a bodhisattva be, just
Yeah.
walking through the park? And there's not something in particular to
Mhm.
kind of, oh, well, a bodhisattva would do this or do that. It's more, it's very open-ended, So
Sure.
there are a variety of things, and there are food offering prayers, there are all kinds of things that are
Mhm.
kind of part of the,
Yeah, a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, on there was a Mother's Day, and Julia led, and she said, for the rest of the day, spend the day imagining every person you're interacting with as, previously or future being your mother. And I did that for all of Mother's Day, and it was awesome. And I've heard a few of you mention that discussion, but having it also be on Mother's Day because there were so many other little reminders flashing around, it was a really nice way to spend. And I also spent Mother's Day with my mother, but imagining like that way that I feel and those things that I think in connection to everybody. So just little one day things help quite a bit. But yeah, okay, thanks. I'll look for that book. I didn't like that.
I wish we had more written down. I mean, there is a lot in the tradition, and yet it's not all packaged.
Yeah. Yeah, Bokrum She's little book was a nice,
Yeah, I just
A
tried
nice
to
little
look it up
package.
and I'm not getting any hits on it.
nothing anywhere.
No.
I was gonna say, it's probably out there somewhere.
Yeah, there's somewhere, maybe I can
print
find
it.
it under
Does someone
a
at
day
this
in the life
have
of a
it?
Buddhist practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And I got other hits, but not that.
Well, maybe we could get the rights to reprint it, and that could be a source of income.
there you
Yeah.
go.
we'll put you in touch with Christiane Boucher.
Did she do that?
Yeah, it's a clear point.
Yeah, it's one of the.
As well as Boka Rinpoche's book, Way of Path of a Bodhisattva, the little book, that's out of print. I can't get that.
I know,
Yeah.
You can
Those are two
download it.
great
if I
books,
recall.
though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the point is to engage in practice all the time. Like it says in the Mahmudra Aspiration Prayer, man, practice like this day and night. It really is, the point is like fill 24 hours, like it's completely all Dharma practice. So you could engage in that on your own. Bokrum Rinpoche's book was really nice, partly because it was Bokrum Rinpoche's book. and so he used things like opening the door and going through it, and the symbolic meaning of that you could give rise to in the moment that you did it. And then crossing a threshold and drinking water, eating, like all these things could be taken as part of the path. The truth is, if you were intent upon it, you could design your own. Like all the things that you do, what would I do in this situation? So here's a situation I do 20 times a day. Now what could I do to make that situation meaningful every time? One of the things that everybody pretty much knows is just the one breath shamatha meditation. You take one breath, follow it, comes in, goes out, it's done. And then you add meaning to that by doing that while you're having a conversation. So the person you're speaking to doesn't need to know. But one breath happens in less than 10 seconds. So usually if somebody's speaking, to take one breath, follow it, and not even intentionally listen to what they're saying. But what we find is that because you were still, you heard it all. You didn't miss anything. Maybe better than if you'd been trying to listen. So So all sorts of things can come from just trying to integrate chunks, pieces of the Dharma into ordinary situations.
So just a little update. You can get it on Amazon. The cheapest is $35 and it goes up to over 60.
There's only a tiny book. We need to
Yeah.
do
So
this.
it's,
Scalping is ubiquitous.
yeah, so it's out of print and it was published by
Yeah.
Coldpoint,
We
so
do need to talk.
Yeah, Sally.
maybe we can do something.
That's okay. One more.
In this same vein, over the last few months, I've really been trying with all of the pieces of my daily practice to really think about what am I doing, how do I connect to it, how do I make it meaningful, and I'm wondering about the ringing of the bell 3 times in the dedication.
Yeah.
Like, if there's anything, any particular reason that there are 3 or any particular things to think of during
Yeah.
those 3. Like, I have a thing that I've started to do that I always feel like it's a little questionable when I make something up.
What is it?
On the first bell, I'll think kind of what I normally think of the dedication. In this exact instant,
Yeah.
may every sentient being experience everything that was good about this meditation. And on the second bell, I'll think if there was any fault in this meditation, may the results of that. Sorry, I don't know why I'm getting Russian. If there's any fault, may the results of that redound only on me and not on other sentient
Yeah.
beings. And then with the third bell, I'll think, may my own awareness be transformed so that I recognize my true nature and I become a
Yeah.
benefit to,
Yeah.
to sentient beings to my maximum potential.
I think that's great. Why not? I mean, really. We ring the bell. Some people do it for refuge too. They go to refuge in the 3 jewels, so they'll ring it once for each of the 3 jewels. Then if you're practicing the Vajrayana, then you gotta add 3 roots, so now you got 6 bells. You know, but these things are not inherently sacred. There's no like deep kind of dharma thing connected, that kind of ritual that somebody would say, no, we're really losing the lineage of ringing the bell here. It's like, it's just, that's not really there. So I think it's in the realm of like, if you can do something with your practice with it and kind of time it like that, why not do that? It's great. So I'm remembering Bokram Rinpoche's thing, waking up in the morning was one of them.
May I get
Yeah.
up from the bed of samsara.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I say it every morning.
And there's
Yeah.
pictures in it too, you see him sitting up in his bed.
yeah.
So
The first time I looked at that, I thought, this is so corny.
corny.
And then you thought,
It's
but
sweet.
what am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
I am so sophisticated.
Happy that I saw it before someone else did, right? Well, we should dedicate.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
next Sunday. It's a good read, but it's not one of those ones you can read over and over again, but it's real sweet. It sounds like it'd be right up your alley.